players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most powerful in the history of Magic the Gathering. Cards like Pest Control, Lava Spur Boots, Lock and Load, and many others. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind BoshNRoll on YouTube, Thraben University, and theepicstorm.com. This episode is sponsored by 3-for-1 Trading and Sparks Law Practice.
Hello, and welcome to episode 122 of the Eternal Glory podcast. Big Mtgo news and OTJ. We've already recorded 30 minutes of introduction and banter for the week, available in our supporter-exclusive pre-show. Check out patreon.com/eternalglory to gain access, or join as a YouTube member for the same content on YouTube instead. As always, I'm Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU.
I am Brian Coval, aka BoshNRoll.
And I am Brian Cook of the Epic Storm.
Next episode, will be a supporter mailbag. If you want to get a question on the podcast, make sure you are supporting through patreon.com/eternalglory or join as a YouTube member. That's where you can submit those. And you'll be joining cool people like Jack B, Taylor R, Kyle L, Carter W, and Fixie H. Shout out to all of our new patrons since the last episode who can send us a question if they want to hear it answered online. On the air? Where are we? We're on the air.
This episode is brought to you by Sparks Law, a business transactional law firm owned by Eternal Magic community member Jonathan Sparks. If you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or gig worker looking to start your own company, Sparks Law can help with partnership agreements, contract reviews, intellectual property protection, or any other business legal questions. If you want to shape your business strategy with a fellow Eternal gamer, reach out via email to jsparks, that's JSPARKS, at sparkslawpractice.com, or call 470-268-5234. The episode is also sponsored by 3-for-1 Trading, one of Europe's leading Magic the Gathering traders. Their online shop has a fantastic selection of high-end Magic cards, especially for vintage, legacy, and old-school players. You can find them at shop.3for1trading.com or visit their booth at major events. They run weekly sales, and new, individually scanned high-end cards are added every Wednesday. Use code EternalGlory to get our community-exclusive offer of free worldwide shipping on your first order over $500 and experience their world-class customer service and exact grading for yourself.
And if you want to advertise to over 10,000 Eternal gamers every single episode, reach out to us. We're always accepting new sponsors.
Speaking of sponsors and partners, let's get into the episode. And this isn't really a sponsor, but it is a partnership that all three of us are joining, not as a podcast, but as our individual platforms. The Magic Online Content Creator Program has launched, and we're all in it. We all got in the first wave.
Woo!
Yeah, very exciting stuff. I'm just going to speak from the heart here and say that support for MTGO creators is very exciting, because it seems like since Arena came along, MTGO is just like, what's that? We don't care. Nobody wants to watch that. We don't want to support that. And clearly that is not the case, because the Daybreak team, I've been talking to them for months, 6 months, 8 months at this point, a long time. After meeting them at some of the Magic Cons last year, they said they were working on something like this, and it's very cool that it is in front of us now.
And this is not just exciting for us. This is kind of a win for like literally everyone. The content creators that you already watch are going to have greater accesses to resource and information and digital cards than they have ever had before. You are going to see new content creators popping up who maybe just financially couldn't afford Magic Online, or who never really had a reason to care about Magic Online. You're going to have people who are coming up with new ideas for things to do using Magic Online. Be patient as some of these people, start to figure out Magic Online, start to figure out the platform, try new recording formats, try playing new formats that they've never done before. Just kind of remember, like, everyone is new at some point, be that to a format or a type of content creation, and give them a little grace as they get warmed up.
Yeah, I have a bunch of friends in the content creation space, usually like webcam CEDH streamers, and several of them are also in the program, and they've been messaging me kind of like, see you in the legacy streets. I've talked to them in the past, and they're like, I watch the Eternal Glory guys. I can't afford legacy myself, but it seems really cool. And those skills transfer to CEDH, which matters to me. And now a bunch of those people are going to be playing legacy. So welcome them with open arms. I sure am.
And this is going to lead to new people coming to the platform because they are watching these people try out new formats. Like, this is a huge shot of life into, like, not just legacy, but Magic Online, more generally speaking. This is very exciting.
But there's other news that isn't just content creator based. Like, we're seeing new player kits being added for essentially every format. There's a Pioneer Humans deck, Pauper Delver, Legacy Burn, Modern Infect, and a Commander Braids deck. But there's also like this Commander collection that they're doing for $40 where you get like 2,000 playable cards. They're trying to bring new blood onto the program so that way more and more people are playing Magic Online. It's an exciting space to be. Like Brian mentioned, Arena was the bread and butter, and I think we're seeing Arena maybe plateau after a while, and now they're breathing new life into this older program that we all know and love.
Arena drew in a lot of younger and casual players. You know, it has bells and whistles, the Uro sound effect or whatever that you either love or hate. But, you know, Magic Online does what Magic Online does relatively well. You know, it's our best approximation of paper play digitally. And, you know, it gets jabs a lot of the time for, you know, looking like a glorified Excel spreadsheet, you know, or something like that. But it mostly gets the job done.
And it hasn't really looked like that in 10 years. Like the old MTGO, I downloaded MTGO, I think in 2004. Gate Crash was Guild Pact. Yeah, original Ravnica. It was the middle of original Ravnica block. And it was weird back then. Like, your avatars actually sat at tables in the waiting room when you were looking for a game. I don't know how much bandwidth was wasted with those images, but stuff like that. Once in a while, I'll get like a Facebook memory pop up of something I screenshotted off MTGO in like 2007. That one looked crazy. It just doesn't look like that anymore. And while it can be tough to get over the hump and play it, there is some stuff to learn, but Magic the Gathering is really hard. And, you know, what game doesn't come with a tutorial? So I'm in for new players on Magic Online, and I recommend, especially legacy players, like people listening to this podcast, if you're not on Magic Online and you do care about performing well in legacy, then you're missing a huge piece of that puzzle, because this is the only place you can really get a ton of reps against a ton of good players.
I think the single biggest level up moment for many, like, people kind of approaching that grinder, like trying to really get good status, is just like buying Magic Online and quintupling the number of games that they can reasonably play to prepare for any serious event.
Right, just the number of games and the access to opponents. Even if you have a solid play group, even if you have like 15 local people and they're all pretty good, you will not play as many games, and your friends are not as good as some of the people you'll queue into in the Magic Online leagues. And it's just a whole different world, and it matters a lot. Like, I have gotten so much better since I started doing content and just have to play Magic all the time. And these games help. The reps are important.
So one of the other things that's really exciting about Magic Online right now is that they are starting competitive EDH leagues. And this was not something that existed before. A couple of times, Brian, I maybe it might have been all three of us, like, we tried to record some Magic Online Commander content, and we had to, like, you know, hunt down like Rebel or Justin Gennari or Julian or whoever to like go and like finish filling our pod. And it was like kind of a pain in the butt to do, because like I would message a Commander content creator, I'm like, hey, do you want to make a video? And they were like, yes, let's do it. And they're like, okay, you have Magic Online? No. Oh. And now the ability to just like click play league and get queued with people within a couple of minutes is kind of a big deal for the viability of Magic Online as a platform for competitive Commander.
Yeah, there are two really important things happening here. One is Magic Online is letting CEDH players get those reps that we were just talking about are so important against random people, and you get more games and against more opponents than you even if you are in one of the big Discord communities that are firing games all the time. Magic Online is doing that for CEDH. And then CEDH is a gigantic pool of players. And also, I think a big part of the future of competitive Magic is going to be CEDH. That's just me seeing the writing on the wall. Not at the expense of anything. I'm going to keep playing Legacy. I know there are the doom and gloomers out there who think one thing getting better will kill everything else, but CEDH is going to grow. We've seen Wizards of the Coast reaching out to tournament organizers, offering prize support if they're willing to stop allowing proxies in their tournaments, which is kind of something that we talked about 6 months ago on the show about what can we do to fix the reserve list problem and the proxy problem, and where's the middle ground between the reserve list is unattainable for a lot of people and Magic cards have to have value, so you can't just print pieces of paper for your whole collection. And it seems like Wizards is reaching out to these proxy heavy communities and making real efforts to support CEDH if CEDH is willing to support Magic the Gathering as an actual item and not a printer paper. So we're seeing some of these things happen. And if MTGO can be the platform where CEDH can grind and get a ton of games in and get all that good practice, that's going to be incredible for that platform. So both of this platform and this community have so much to offer each other, and it's really exciting that it's unlocked.
Now, Bryant and I have both played a competitive Commander League at this point, and recorded it for content. It is a good replication of CEDH play, but there are a couple of asterisks next to that, and Magic Online in its current state is not a full replica of the paper play experience, just like Magic Online Legacy doesn't quite have everything that paper play has to offer.
I would agree with that. So there's like some infinite combos that might take you a little bit longer with Magic Online, like having a Basalt Monolith in play and a Kinnan. You can't just say, I'll have infinite mana. You have to collect Basalt Monolith, twice for a single mana, because you have to make 3 mana and then you have to untap it or whatever it may be. And basically it just takes you a little bit longer to get through some of those steps. Or cards like Grinding Station, have to do the tedious thing of, okay, I'm going to mill 3, I'll escape this artifact, I'll mill 3 again. You have to do that all manually. So some of those effects aren't quite as good, but it's still as close as you can get. Those sort of things exist in other formats, like Phil mentioned. I just recorded Bomberman in Legacy with Lion's Eye Diamond. It was a struggle there, but thankfully my opponents were just like, yeah, I'm dead, I'll concede. And that's capable when playing Magic Online CEDH as well.
Yeah, these are the same problems that Legacy players already know. I've played Bomberman a bunch of times. The worst one I ever had to do was Urza combo in Modern, where I was playing against Tron, who I did actually have to hardlock out of the game. I couldn't just do enough and then pass, because if they Oblivion Stone or Ugin, they're actually just right back in it. So I actually did have to make infinite mana with Thopter Foundry loop and then start flipping my deck 5 mana at a time until I could Cryptic Command all of their Tron lands out of play. And that sucked. So that sort of thing, it is really tough to have to do that. And you can't count on opponents to just see that the win is there and scoop. Because sometimes in CDH, and I've been there, I've been on both sides of this, you're like, is this good enough? And they're like, yeah, let's play it out. And then you play it out, and then they have something for the end of your combo that doesn't work at the beginning, like Cephalid Coliseum targeting you when your deck's empty for a Thassa's Oracle, that sort of thing. Sometimes you have to play it out. And these are the same problems. The cards that are missing, like Flesh Duplicate, is a format staple in CEDH. That's from the Doctor Who decks that we don't seem to be getting on Magic Online. But there is one actual huge difference, huge difference that people are going to have to get used to, and that's communication. Because the communication in these games is the MTGO chat, which is slow and clunky compared to speaking to a person in person, which is a huge part of CEDH. Just shut up and play your cards doesn't work because you actually do have to convince people to, fight over this, don't fight over this. This is okay. We need to save our interaction for this. And that's a lot harder to do in a type chat type thing.
One quick note is the first one that I recorded was 20 minutes. They've since then increased the clock. The Magic Online team is super receptive to feedback. I played in the very first league that fired, and I was like, hey, I played 3 matches, 20 minutes didn't feel like enough. And they were just like, okay, what do you think it should be? And I was like, well, let's try bumping it up to 30. And they're like, done within seconds. And it updated live games that were happening at that very moment. So if you have ideas on how to make this play experience better, you can join the Magic Online Discord, or they have a forum where you can submit bugs, stuff like that. They are looking to make this better for everyone.
Yeah, like they are aware of some things like, hey, the lag is noticeably worse in 4-player games. Like they are aware, they are actively taking feedback, and I would expect the commander experience to get smoother relatively quickly.
Yeah, like none of us are in MTGO strategy meetings. So like we don't actually know any of this stuff, but I would imagine that getting CEDH and even more so on the pathway to casual EDH to be a viable, pleasant thing to do with your time on Magic Online would be a huge priority to making this program the biggest it can be.
Yeah, I think if you get players who want to like get home from work, eat dinner, and then have a beer and fire off a casual commander league, like if you just get players invested in that sort of thing, like that is a giant market to tap. Whereas as of right now, like Spell Table is the thing to go. And if you're active on Twitter, like you probably see all the time, like looking for one for casual EDH tonight, around 7. And if you're not in like some dedicated Discord towards filling games or something, like sometimes it's tough to physically get people. So there's an appeal for queue for 3 minutes, play your game.
I've gotten frantic messages like minutes before a major EDH streamer goes live where they're just like, yo, somebody backed out. Are you free tonight? It's like, sorry, no, I wish I could. But these are people with tens of thousands of followers who struggle to fill a game on short notice. It's not easy being out there, and just being able to boot up Magic Online, click the button, and 3 people appear is so sick.
Yeah, look behind the curtain for a minute. All these EDH content creators that you see online all have like Google calendars or an equivalent that they are like sending out invites. They have spreadsheets for who's playing whom, when, at what power level, at what time. It is a lot to coordinate.
I know we all like CDH, but we love Legacy, and I feel like our audience needs to know. On the weekends, there are now 4 Legacy challenges. There's a Friday night, a Saturday morning, a Saturday night, and then a Sunday morning. And depending on where your time zone is, if you're on the East Coast, the Friday night one starts at 8 p.m., Saturday morning starts at 7 a.m., Saturday night starts at 11 p.m., and then Sunday morning starts at 11 a.m. That's assuming you're on the East Coast, adjust for where you live. But that is awesome that Legacy is now getting 4 major events every single weekend.
Yeah, that's a lot of Legacy if you want to play, and a lot of data if you want to study. Just good stuff.
Yeah, so show up with your Null Rods, Chalice of the Voids, and Mindbreak Traps to the Friday night challenges. That's where all the Storm Boys hang out. Get them.
Wow, Phil. Wow, why would you tell everyone our deep, dark secret?
Yeah, for those of you who are not subscribers and didn't hear the pre-show, Bryant and 2 other The Epic Storm staff writers finished 3rd, 7th, and 9th, was it, in that tournament?
That was correct.
And then there were 2 Black Saga Storm players also in top 8. So 5 of the top 9 were Storm on Friday night. So get in there. Don't let them keep doing that.
Or let us. That works too.
Storm Dad Friday. Put it on the calendar.
Hey guys, I heard that there's a new set coming out. Have you heard anything about it?
I heard that it's actually like 3 sets.
What?
That all come in one pack. Okay, so I'm going to spend like 30 seconds on this. We're going to talk about the individual cards that we might think impact Eternal formats from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So Outlaws of Thunder Junction is a standard legal Magic set. It is the name of the set. And then it has a breaking news. I had to think of that. Breaking news sheet which are not standard legal, but you can play them in draft if you open them. And those are a bunch of high power reprints, all of which commit crimes. And committing a crime is targeting anything your opponent owns. All of the breaking news cards commit a crime in some way. And some of them are like Cruel Ultimatum, and some of them are like Mana Drain and Force of Vigor. There's a bunch of just dope cards that you could get, which are going to include a bunch of reprints for legacy cards, some of which haven't been reprinted in a while, like Force of Vigor. That was my preview card, and that's good news for us. And then there's a third thing going on in there, which is the Big Score, which was supposed to be another set. They were going to do an epilogue set with tiny booster packs, like 8-card booster packs, like they did with March of the Machines Aftermath. But that product was so heinous that they decided to just shove that into OTJ packs. So Big Score is a different set that is also in OTJ packs. Those two things are both standard legal. And then there's the Breaking News sheet that is not standard legal, but is full of cool legacy cards. And then there's also an OTJ Commander set, which does not come in the same packs, but is legacy legal. Oh, there's that.
Yo, dog, I heard you like sets in your set. So we put a set in your set so you could set while you set.
You know, as ridiculous as that is, I still prefer that to epilogue booster packs and having to purchase like 8-card booster packs that contain a very tiny set for the same price as a full booster pack just to get my pest controls. No thanks.
What's Pest Control?
You're just gonna go out of order in the show notes, you monster? Fine. Let's talk about Pest Control. This is white and a black for a sorcery. Destroy all non-land permanents with mana value 1 or less, and it has cycling for 2 mana.
It didn't need cycling. This card was already so good without the ability to cycle it. They just made this card completely free to play.
In one of our recent episodes, we were talking about like what is the floor on the card. The floor on this card is insane because like at worst, it is a 2-mana cantrip that has 2 colors for pitching to relevant cards like Solitude and Grief.
Chromox?
Or Chromox, yeah, absolutely. And the ceiling is like a meltdown effect that doesn't require you to play red, a pseudo board wipe for small creature decks, wipe out all the Delvers and the Dragon Rage Channelers at the same time. I think my biggest conceptual problem with this card is it's hard for me to point to a deck and go like, that's the home where it's overpowered.
Right. We talked about all of these cool things that a black-white card does, but what legacy deck is black-white right now? Are we splashing Scam to be Esper, a thing that I have seen happening in Vintage? Like Dimir Luris and Azorius Luris are 2 of the top archetypes in Vintage, and some folks have hybridized them into Esper Luris. We could see Pest Control there. Though this is symmetrical. Destroy all non-land permanents. A Urza Saga Mox deck probably might not want to play these of their own. So maybe that doesn't make sense. But as far as Legacy goes, 5-color, like 4 and 5-color soup decks, bean soup decks with Leyline Binding and whatever, you could obviously play it there. But yeah, there's not a Esper Stoneblade deck right now. And a deck like Esper Vial, which is a fringe, but I still run into it here and there. And this kills all your own Aether Vials. I don't know. Like, finding a home for this is going to be the tricky one. But I know Bryant is over there salivating with his 5-color Burning Wish deck. He's already got a home for this.
I have thought about Burning Wishing for Pest Control because it does answer double Chalice of the Void with 1 card, which is really nice. But I'm also a big believer, and this has come to me over the last handful of years, if something is good enough, people will build around. And I feel like I'm not trying to make fun of these people, I'm really not, but like the Ant community, for example, Ad Nauseam Tendrils, they're always looking for cards to slot in, where the Epic Storm is willing to build around whenever the new powerful thing is. And I feel like that's part of the reason why the Epic Storm has continued to thrive, while Ad Nauseam Tendrils, it's fine. And if Pest Control really is this premier removal spell, maybe you decide, hey, I want to be 4-color splashing black or white instead of red. And all of a sudden you start to see things shift that way. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do. And it's okay to build around rather than just add.
Yep. It's always okay to get creative to solve a problem. I imagine I will end up playing this in decks, but also this isn't like Dragon's Rage Channeler. It's not like this is a cool new thing where now it raises the stock of Mishra's Bauble in decks because we want Surveil triggers and we want artifacts in the graveyard. Like, this isn't Murktide Regent where it's like, okay, we just need to survive long enough to play our 8/8. I mean, this is a reactive removal spell, like conditional removal spell. So we have to be realistic that this is not like seeing White Plume Adventure for the first time. This is just like another card that could go into slots. Like maybe this is as good as Meltdown if decks can cast it, or maybe this ends up like Rakdos Charm or Pernicious Deed, just in those sort of fringe, sometimes sideboard cards, sometimes they make sense in the meta, sometimes they don't kind of joints. We'll see. But having cycling on this card that is insanely powerful in the right spot and can just be a different card in other spots, cycling was a gift on this one, or else I don't know that we'd be talking about it very much.
Agreed. I think this is kind of similar to Hidetsugu Consumes All. It doesn't eventually turn into a win condition, which is a fundamental difference, but I feel like this is on that same sort of power level where it's a multi-pip, like somewhat conditional sweeper that has additional upside.
I think it's considerably better than that card personally, just because the ability to cycle and costing 2 mana. And another thought that I had, this is actually my initial impression reading this card. And I mean, I'm not trying to talk smack here, but my first thought was 8 cast is never coming back. Between Meltdown and this, like the glory days of 8 cast, this deck that didn't run any reserveless cards, it would need a really good new printing to come back from this, I think.
So 8 cast has morphed into Patchwork Automaton Stompy. It's not really trying, it hasn't been trying to really 8 cast since Bowmaster was printed. It's down to like 4 or 5 cast these days, and sometimes it has a Painter Servant pivot, and sometimes it just tries to basically play aggro shops, but in Legacy. And Pest Control does not kill Patches O'Houlihan, which is he can dodge this wrench, and he can dodge a ball, and he will stay in play at the same size once you Pest Control. So also, like, the boot on 8 cast neck is Orcish Bowmaster, and I don't think Pest Control is going to move a needle there. But, I mean, random, janky, non-red decks that need a way to catch up against Urza Saga certainly have one now.
Let's talk about the card that I think is the best card in the set. Lava Spur Boots. An uncommon. 1 mana for an artifact equipment. Equip cost 1. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has haste and ward 1. And I am over the moon for this card.
Phil, why is it so good, though? It's just an equipment for 1 mana.
Yeah. Urza's Saga is kind of a cheat code in Legacy. I forget who was tweeting about this, but like, Grief, Reanimate. Really easy way to win a game. Urza Saga, Ancient Tomb. Really easy way to win a game of Magic. Dark Ritual, followed by some other mana into Storm Spells. You know, you kind of have some clear paths towards things that are just very powerful to do. And Lava Spur Boots makes the Urza Saga cheat code better, because normally when Urza Saga ticks up to Chapter 3, you make your second token, and that token doesn't get to attack this turn. Well, Lava Spur Boots changes that. You make your 1 mana producing land drop, and you just get to immediately attack with both construct tokens. That is a massive difference in pressure.
Yeah, that flips a lot of games. I'm just thinking about the hundreds or thousands of times where I've had to work through an Urza Saga fair and square, where it's like, yeah, Swords to Plowshares, the first construct, then I have a turn cycle to figure out how to deal with the second one. Maybe not anymore. And frequently in those games where you do have to answer the 3-for-1 as just with 3 cards of your own, it is really tough, and it does frequently come down to those last few points of life, or that last top deck, or that can I get to 4 mana to Supreme Verdict in time, or whatever. And if that thing has haste and it's harder to kill because it has Ward 1, that's a lot to ask.
This is scary versus the control decks for the pressure, and this is scary versus combo decks because this is often going to take an entire turn off the clock. Like, a lot of times when you're playing an Urza Saga deck versus a combo deck, you play some lock piece, you drop Urza Saga, it takes you a couple turn cycles to kill them. If you eliminate one of those turn cycles, that's less time for the Doomsday player to set up or the Storm player to set up. And I think this is going to matter a lot in fair Urza Saga cases. And Dark Depths is sometimes played in decks with Urza Saga as well. So you can have these lands decks that are just like threatening to kill you with Urza Saga tokens. They get a Lava Spur Boots, they increase that pressure, And now on future turns, those boots could just go onto a Merit Lage and immediately dome you for 20.
21, Phil.
Oh, pardon me.
Yeah, +1/+0 on those baddies. And yeah, like we just talked about Pest Control a lot, and we compared it to Meltdown. Both of those are sorceries. And a lot of the time, the play pattern versus Saga is like, yeah, I'll take 6 from a construct, and then I'll just mop up the whole board, and we're back to stability. Now you're taking 13 on that same interaction, and maybe you do mop the board back to stability, but taking 13 is a lot of damage, and you gotta do stuff after that point.
I think a thing that has frustrated me during spoiler season is that people say, this is worse than Shadow Spear, and they just end their sentence there, when these cards have entirely different purposes.
Right.
Like, Lava Spur Boots is largely offensive power. Like, it exists to give your opponent less time to stabilize or win the game. Whereas Shadow Spear is basically, I will win if I don't die. This is my defensive tool so that I can gain life so that I stay alive versus the Delvers or the Murktide Regents that are beating me down. And the Trample is like technically offensive text, but like you are playing Shadow Spear for that lifelink the vast majority of the time.
Maybe it's just the decks that I play, but when I use Shadow Spear, it's typically to break up a board stall. Like, hey, I can't get through these creatures in the time that I need. So if I get Shadow Spear here, my construct will trample over, and then this construct is obviously going to be blocked, but I'm applying enough pressure where it's going to swing the game in my direction. And I do see that comparison to the offense of Lava Spur Boots, but I think that generally, at least historically speaking, Shadow Spear tends to be a sideboard card. I view Lava Spur Boots as a main deck card. It is a card that is going to fundamentally change how Urza Saga works in Legacy, in my opinion. I am with Phil. I think it's probably the best card in the set, and I'm really high on Pest Control.
Yeah, Shadow Spear is the trample, like granting evasion to a giant creature, or pseudo evasion, is a way to break open a board stall, but also just thinking about the game in terms of how many turns there are going to be played. Lava Spur Boots makes your opponent dead a turn or two earlier, where Shadow Spear lets them play those 2 or 3 additional turns, except it might not matter. And those are different things. Also, Shadow Spear equips for 2, not for 1. That's a different thing. Cards that cost more have different effects than cards that cost less. This is like, I'm going to go on a side rant for a second here. A couple days ago on the channel, or like a week ago, I don't know, it all blurs together, I was asked to build a deck around Invisible Stalker, 1/1, hexproof, unblockable. And I wanted a 5th copy of in the deck to like draw it more often. And I came to Silhano Ledgewalker, which is a 1/1 hexproof, can only be blocked by flyers. And I got like 10 comments that were like, True Name Nemesis should have been the 5th copy. It's like, and then people explained to me how it's a 3/1 instead of a 1/1. And it's fully unblockable instead of conditionally unblockable. It's like, yeah, that card costs more mana. That's the fundamental game engine. What are you talking about? Like, when people cast Lightning Bolt, do you tell them about Searing Wind? What the fuck? Like, just that is a different conversation. So comparing a 1 mana equip to a 2 mana equip, we're already talking about different things. And then what the actual text on those cards is also matters. Like, what problem are you trying to solve here? So just, especially when we're talking about in terms of Legacy, which is a deep card pool. And I think Commander players are the most guilty of this, but Legacy players do it too, where it's like, we get a new card and we immediately compare it to all other cards. Like, why would you ever play Cancel? Counterspell exists. That's true in Legacy. It's not true in Standard. Like, you just don't have Counterspell there. You might have to play Cancel. So thinking about just Magic the Gathering existing on a spectrum of all the different ways you could play it, and then also thinking about what you're trying to do with your cards. Between Lava Spur Boots and Shadow Spear, if they just arrived for free attached to whatever I wanted, maybe Shadow Spear is more powerful. Still, though, maybe it's not. And these are close enough and different enough that obviously the comparison makes sense to make. And in the opportunity cost of deck building, how many 1 mana equipments can you put in there in your Urza Saga package? And I don't know, we'll see. I think Lava Spur Boots is more main deckable than Shadow Spear, though, like Brian said. So I'm in with that.
I've got one last thing on this card. Remember that, like, haste also lets your things that have activated abilities that tap activate those abilities. You might play this in your painter deck, and all of a sudden you're giving your goblin welders haste out of nowhere. Like, that sort of thing can be absolutely terrifying at this low of a deck building cost.
That's way better than Shadow Spear.
All right, so let's talk about another card you might put in your red deck if you're a crazy person like me. Stingerback Terror. This is 2 colorless and 2 red for a 7/7 flying trample scorpion dragon, but it gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand. It also has plot for 2 colorless and a red, which means that for 2 colorless and a red, you can essentially exile it from your hand as a sorcery. Or wait, do plot as a sorcery?
Yes.
Yeah, plot only as a sorcery. Okay, it's at the end. So you can plot this for 3 mana, and then on the next turn or on a later turn, you can cast it for free. This is one that has been sent to me by a handful of like Red Prison Moon Stompy enthusiasts. It's very rare to get like a red flyer that could be paid for 3 mana. So like, this is an interesting blocker versus evasive threats. This is something that can hang with Murktide Regent in terms of size. But this one feels incredibly awkward to me, and I'm not really seeing it. I would like to be proven wrong.
Yeah, this looks like, because it doesn't come in it with haste. So you spend 3 mana to exile Stingerback Terror. And it's not like a morph. Plot is face up. Your opponent can see that it's there. And then next turn for 0 mana, you place Stingerback Terror on the stack. And now you have somewhere between a 3/3 and a 7/7 with flying and trample. Doesn't have haste. You're not getting in for 7 right away. Depending on if you've emptied your hand enough, it may or may not even beat a Delver in combat at this point. I don't know. This looks like a fringe thing that we're going to see, but probably won't hold.
That's where I'm at.
Want to know why the Moon Stompy community was so excited about this card? It is a classic throwback, I think, to the early days of that deck, back when they used to run Gothan Raiders. It's essentially just an upgraded version of that card. But I think that Moon Stompy has just gone so far past the point of playing a big dumb beater that we're probably not going to play something like a Stingerback Terror.
Yeah.
Yeah, Moon Stompy was called Dragon Stompy in the early days. Rakdos Pit Dragon was their win con, and Gothan Raiders helped you get Hellbent, which is when the dragon gets double strike. And I mean, if you want to be Hellbent with a big dragon in play and live those old times, I could see Stingerback Terror making the cut. But if you're trying to actually rabble and lock, you need to, probably think about your slots. Also, Plot and Trinisphere is not a combo. Still costs 3.
Oh, yeah, Phil. I think that you should definitely play this card and then maybe cut the Trinispheres from your deck.
Yeah, cut all the Trinispheres. We're done with those.
You might be onto something here. Trinisphere doesn't reduce people's life total to 0 usually, unless I animate it with my Karn and tap it.
I have screenshots of that, Phil. I promise you.
Yeah, in for 3. Get them.
Okay, just in case anyone is not familiar with this joke, Trinisphere stops working if you tap it.
Yep, do not attack a Storm player for 3 if you have them locked with Karn and Trinisphere. Please don't. Unless Bryant is behind the messaging, and then, go for it. You got to win somehow.
Big agree.
All right, I'll set up the next one. We've got Satoru the Infiltrator. This is blue-black, 2 mana for a 2/3 menace, legendary creature, human ninja rogue. Whenever Satoru the Infiltrator and or one or more other non-token creatures enter the battlefield under your control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, draw a card. That's a lot of words, and it basically is like if you have cheated a creature into play somehow, enjoy an extra card for the trouble. This works with Reanimator. This works with Scam. You pitch a Grief, you get to draw a card. You reanimate that Grief, you draw another card. Satoru himself is blue and black, which pitches to both Force of Will and Grief. That's a spot that Whale of the Forgotten is currently occupying in the Dimir Riskaminator style decks. And then if you want to branch out from Humble Dimir and start ephemerating things, those creatures entered without being cast. So ephemerate, draw a card, plus whatever else is happening. Activate Aether Vial, draw a card. There's a lot going on in this little text box.
Yeah, I think those are like the good ways to use it. So the text is if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them. So this also could be at like Cheerios outlet. You can just go and play all your like Memnites and Ornithopters and stuff and draw a shit ton of cards that way. And it's another like glimpse of nature effect for those sorts of decks.
Yeah, I mean, bug Cheerios with Satoru, Beck Call, and Glimpse of Nature. I mean, maybe there's a critical mass now. Maybe we could do it. I still don't believe in it, but this is an upgrade for garbage like that.
Yeah, when this card was spoiled, a lot of people were talking about the possibility with Grief or just seeing play him, Dimir Ninjas. And I kind of feel like neither of those decks actually want this card. I could be wrong. I do think that this card is playable, but the bar for playable in Legacy is so high where I don't know. Like you mentioned, Drawn in the Lock is the card that this might be competing with. Or I'm sorry, Will of the Forgotten.
No, Whale of Forgotten. But I have seen Drown in the Lock also in the deck. So we're looking for cards like this.
Yeah, like, is this better than those cards? But they have very different functions. So, like, is draw a card comparable with removal or dig or whatever? And it ends up being a complicated puzzle to solve. I'm not saying never, but I'm just saying that it's not a one-for-one clean swap. Like, this card is going to have to force its way into a new home.
Right. I will spoiler that Satoru Rescaminator is the first OTJ deck in my recorded queue when I have access to these cards. So we'll find out quick.
I think one of my favorite things about this is, in addition to the kind of bonkers ability, it also just has Menace. Like, it is a 2-mana, 2/3 Menace body, and Menace is something that I am respecting more and more and more in Legacy as time goes on. Just doing something to invalidate traditional attacking and blocking and, like, basic combat math is really good.
Yeah, Phil, this card has a lot of words on it, like legendary creature, human, ninja, rogue. Obviously, it's there to set up your ninjutsu, right?
Yeah, sure. You can do that too.
Yes, technically legal. Guys, I want to go off script for like one card here that I noticed we didn't include. I want to talk about Duelist of the Mind real quick. This is Nathan Stoyer's World Championship card. It's 1 and a blue, creature, human advisor, flying vigilance. Its power is equal to the number of cards you've drawn this turn, and whenever you commit a crime, you may draw a card, discard a card. This triggers only once each turn. So this is probably going to land in that Ledger Shredder space of not good enough. But, Brainstorm, get in for 4 with my Flying Vig. I think this could get pretty powerful in situations that are set up for it. Like, do we want to invest in a thing where, like, it only attacks for 2 if you've pondered this turn? Or I could see it in decks where it's like Thoughtseize You loot in for 2. I don't know. This one is also just on kind of my list of potentially playable cards that probably are going to make a huge dent in Legacy. But I wanted to throw it out there.
I am skeptical, but I also would not be surprised to lose a couple of games of Magic to this here and there.
Yeah, Flying and Vigilance on a cheap body that can hit like a truck with not that much setup. There's upside. Vigilance, like you said, you're starting to respect Menace. Me too. Vigilance also. The more I play with Scion of Draco, granting various words to my creatures, the more I realize how every single combat word is highly impactful in Constructed, where we're planning on doing a very delicate dance, and then something like Vigilance or Trample or Menace just breaks it open.
So the next one is a weird one that I'm not too hyped about, but I've seen a lot of hype surrounding Harvester of Misery. So this is 3 colorless and 2 black for a 5/4 Menace, good keyword. When it ETBs, other creatures get -2. Oh, hold on. Aside, we're not ETBing anymore. We are now entering. That is the shortened keyword way to enter the battlefield now.
This one still says enter the battlefield, Phil.
I know. I'm just talking about it. Came up. All right. So when it enters the battlefield, other creatures get -2, -2 until the end of turn. More importantly, for 1 colorless and a black, you can discard this card to give target creature -2, -2 until end of turn. We have seen a lot of use of the channel lands in Legacy, probably way more than we expected when we first saw those cards spoiled. And the ability for this to be an uncounterable removal spell in the early game, a pseudo board wipe attached to a 5/4 Menace in the late game, while also being an animate dead / reanimate target, is a legitimately interesting collection of roles.
Right. So the channel lands, they come at the cost of a land slot, which is less of a cost and more of a upgrade a card I was going to play anyway. Harvester of Misery, like, obviously we can imagine situations where it's like, kill your Containment Priest and then reanimate this, and now I have a body. Or like you play Containment Priest and I just Dark Ritual this out and now your priest is dead. Or even the discard ability on this has no timing restrictions. So like I cast Reanimate, you cast Priest, I channel this in response, kill your priest. We can imagine those, but what card are we cutting from our Reanimator deck to make room for this 5 mana 5/4. Like we talked about Pest Control, the floor being pay 2 to cycle it. If your opponent just doesn't give you an X2 to kill, and then you have this 5 mana 5/4 in your hand, whatever, that sucks. The floor in this is actually insanely low.
So let's talk about Geral the Fleshwright.
Finally, a combo card.
I'm actually excited about this. Let's go.
Geral the Fleshwright is a 2 and a blue, so 3 mana total for a 2/3 legendary creature human warlock. Whenever you cast a spell during your turn other than your first spell for that turn, create a 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature token. Whenever a zombie enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each other zombie that entered the battlefield this turn under your control.
Okay, so this is the horrific love child of Monastery Mentor and Ave Progenitor Ruse. That's kind of what we've got here. It will never trigger off your first spell, but it can trigger off creatures, unlike something like Monastery Mentor or Young Pyromancer. And each subsequent spell after that one makes the zombies bigger. So your second spell for the turn makes a 2/2, your third spell for the turn makes a 3/3, and the zombie is the size of the number of spells you've cast this turn. And you just get this Ave Progenitor Ooze situation, but you don't have to storm up into it. It can just like be in play this turn, and then next turn you like Mox Opal, Dark Ritual, Lion's Eye Diamond pass with all that power in play, even if like nothing else is going on. So I'll let Bryant talk about the combo applications of this, but it's also just kind of a blue Monastery Mentor, and cards like that have been good in the past. It does not hit as hard as Monastery Mentor and isn't really as reliable. It's legendary, so it gets bounced by Karakas, which is always a concern in Legacy. But if you're blue-white, you can save it with your Karakas, which is an upgrade in Legacy. I don't know. I will probably play with this card, and I will probably enjoy it when it does its thing.
Like Brian, I have some reservations about the card. Being blue is not always a bonus. That means Pyroblast can hit it. It is a 2/3, so it is hit or killable with Lightning Bolt, I should say. But I think that the potential upside is there. It is a card that could theoretically help you beat some of the prison pieces in Legacy. You're able to play spells into a Chalice of the Void or Null Rod in order to create more zombie tokens. Your spells don't have to resolve in order to cast them. You can just cast spells into Chalice of the Void and stuff like that. And it's got a relatively low mana cost, unlike Ave Progenitor Ooze. So you're able to play it and then play more spells, which is a pretty huge difference maker. I'm going to record with this card. I don't know if it'll end up being good enough, but it's one of those cards where it might be, it might not be, and only testing can tell.
Do you see yourself like main decking this in a High Tide style deck, or are you playing like 3 in the sideboard of an otherwise normal Storm deck as a juke? Like, what's your vision?
I vision it as a juke, but if you wanted to play it in the main deck of a High Tide combo deck, you could. It's just, with a lot of combo decks, it's like, why do you want to turn on the removal spells? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Like, you have to have a really good reason.
Yep, agreed. And I just want to point out a rules interaction with this. When the text is whenever you cast a spell during your turn other than your first spell, which means that Geral can be the first spell that turn, and then you just like ponder right away and you get a zombie. He doesn't have to see you cast the first spell. The game tracks that. Like you could even ponder, find Geral, cast Geral, and then ponder again after that. Imagine a world where you have all 4 ponders and the mana to cast them. Oh my god, I just got sweaty. But yeah, so like in that world, Geral will actually trigger off of that 4th ponder. It doesn't really care where it shows up in the chain. But that first zombie is still only a 2/2.
Since we're talking about cards you can play in High Tide, the next one I think is legitimately playable. It is called Lock and Load. It's 2 and a blue for a sorcery with plot for 3 and a blue. So it costs 1 more mana to plot it for the following turn. But the card reads sorcery, draw a card, and then draw a card for each other instant or sorcery spell you've cast this turn. What? 3 mana, and it essentially has Storm for draw card? Like, this is definitely going to be playable in Time Spiral Shells. I am so excited about this. I have not loved Cunning Wish in those decks for a very long time, and a lot of those decks, you're like, I really wish I had something lower to the ground than Mind's Desire plus Time Spiral, because playing a bunch of 6-drops in your deck can be a little bit awkward, and now we have Lock and Load. This card is going to really open up the doors for Mono Blue Storm combo in Legacy.
If I ever see this plotted, I'm going to be just assuming I'm dead. Like, the second that gets exiled, I'm like, well, we got one turn, team. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, my biggest issue here is like, why do I want to be playing Mono Blue Storm? Like, we live in the 40% Orcish Bowmasters world. Like, you're working too hard, folks. But I salute you.
You hear that, Marcus Ewald? Phil's coming at you.
Wow.
I salute you, and I will probably play this in a high tide league. You know, I know my life, but Bowmasters.
I might even play this alongside Geral. They seem like they would go in the same deck.
Sometimes you just want to watch the world burn, Phil.
Speaking of burning the world in Storm, let's get to the next card. Elemental Eruption. This is from the Commander. This is not in any packs. 4 red, so 6 mana sorcery. Make a 4/4 dragon elemental creature token with flying and prowess, Storm. Just empty the dragon warrens.
For a very long time, I wished that I could Burning Wish for Hunting Pack. And when I saw this, I was like, oh wow, they finally did it. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, really, the only thing that answers this is engineered explosives, except for the fact they just printed Pest Control. So we'll see how good Pest Control is. But I honestly, and this is going to sound crazy, I was super underwhelmed with Mind's Desire. And even Elemental Eruption for 2 or 3 is probably going to win most games. Like, just 2 4/4 flying dragons with prowess, that fights off Murktide Regent or Delver of Secrets or Dragon's Rage Channelers. Like, this card is actually really low effort to win a game. Like, you only need a couple Storm to win with it.
Yeah, and in a Burning Wish Shell where the opportunity cost is a sideboard slot and not like a main deck thing, like we were talking about with that, whatever that black creature was that kills a thing, maybe. Having like that in the Wishboard to reach for is actually pretty exciting.
The other thing is that if you wanted to build some sort of like red ritual deck of some kind, it doesn't take a lot for this kill. Like, if you just like writ, play this, that is pretty respectable by itself. Like, that is 12 power, and those things have prowess, so future things that you cast will also impact it. There might be something here.
Yeah, I mean, Mono Red Sneak Attack has its diehards, and this could be an additional threat index like that one that are just trying to get to 5 or 6 mana once and then hope it works.
Unlike Mind's Desire, it also benefits from being red. You're not trying to make off-color mana, so things like Rite of Flame or Seething Song actually make the correct color mana.
Truth. Phil, you want to read this white creature? Is this a Death and Taxes card?
I don't know. Is Death and Taxes even a deck anymore?
Barely.
All right, this is Aven Interrupter. 1 colorless and 2 white for a 2/2 bird rogue with flash and flying. When it enters the battlefield, exile target spell. It becomes plotted. Spells your opponents cast from graveyards or from exile cost 2 more to cast. So this is sort of an interesting, like, pseudo remand attached to a body where you temporarily stop a spell and make it harder to cast later on. I think what's important here is that it's not just one spell that this static ability applies to. It says spells your opponents cast from graveyards or from exile cost 2 more to cast. So this is kind of a generic hate bearer that also can temporarily stop a spell.
Yeah.
My first thought was Beseech the Mirror cast spells from exile. And I was just like, great, Beseech costs 6.
Yeah, this thing, it is important to separate the exile ability and the tax, because while they do interact with each other, because the plotted thing now costs 2, there's also just like in formats like CEDH where Underworld Breach is one of the main win cons. It's basically impossible to breach into this thing.
We have a couple left here. In our last episode, we talked about Magebane Lizards and High Noon and how those cards really have to compete with other prison cards that have already been printed. So we don't want to spend too much longer on those. But there is another card here that I think is pretty interesting. If you're familiar with the card Reprocess, they've upgraded it. It's called Pitiless Carnage for 3 and a black for a sorcery, as plot for 1 black, sacrifice any number of permanents you control, and then draw that many cards. So unlike something like Paradoxical Outcome, you could sacrifice lands or tokens. You can get this off of Beseech the Mirror. You can replay cards off of it from a Gaia's Will. There's something here with this card. I'm going to be buying cards or copies of this card. I think that this card has the potential to be playable.
Right, and the plot cost is Dark Ritual, like 1 BB.
Correct.
So you could even just like fire this out into exile on turn 1, and then turn 4, turn 5, whenever it's time. There it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if that play pattern's good, but it's there.
This sort of reminds me of like Reign of Filth, where you can sacrifice your lands for additional value, but rather than mana, it's now cards and just yeeting your 5 lands on a combo turn in the late game. That's pretty cool.
Another pretty cool card out of this set is called Memory Vessel. I'm sure both of you know the card Memory Jar. Well, they've reprinted it with a new name. So for 3 red, you get an artifact that says Exile Memory Vessel. Each player exiles the top 7 cards from their library until your next turn. Players may play the cards exiled this way, and they can't play spells from their hand. Activate this only as a sorcery. So if you're interested in some Goblin Welder shenanigans, this card could be for you. You could also put it to your graveyard with Goblin Engineer. There's a lot of people brewing with this card at the moment, and a card just like it is banned in Legacy, so there could be something here.
Yeah, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but this is different in multiple ways that make it a lot worse than Memory Jar. Curb your enthusiasm if you're like Memory Jar's back, but I can definitely see Goblin Welder throwing this thing around to some insane advantage.
I think Molten Duplication is also interesting. So this is 1 in a red for a sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types, gets haste, and you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. This is a card that I had slated to pick up for just casual EDH purposes. And then I saw, or rather heard, that some people were trying to do like copy my coveted jewel nonsense with this. It's possible this could filter through into some actual constructed play.
Yeah, this is another Heat Shimmer effect that goes infinite with Dualcaster Mage, which is not something that usually comes up in Legacy, but that is a huge end game in a lot of turbo CEDH decks, and just when you're talking about a singleton format, having another version of the thing that you already like, this is going to be a CDH card for sure. Not in every deck, but in decks that need it to find a way to win.
I would like to copy my Dockside.
Yep, you can do that. If attacking for infinite doesn't appease you, copying Dockside Extortionist for a bunch of mana is also pretty good.
There's a card that was getting a lot of attention when it was spoiled, but I think this is one of those classic people are thinking about the ceiling and not the floor cards. Insatiable Avarice. I probably didn't pronounce that correctly.
Avarice.
So for 1 black plus Spree, and Spree says you can choose 1 or more additional costs, so plus 2, so it'd be 3 mana. Search your library for a card, then shuffle that card and put it on top. Or plus black, target player draws 3 cards and loses 3 life. A lot of people are like, oh, well, you can make your opponent draw 3 cards when I have an Orcish Bowmaster in play, and you get to tutor a card. It's like, is that really what you want to be doing? Why are we thinking about this card that way? Why aren't you thinking, hey, this is Ristic Tutor, that card from Prophecy that sees no play? Or, all these other 3-mana tutors that don't see any play in Legacy that actually put the card to your hand instead of on top of your deck. Like, this card is not that good, but I see a lot of people brewing around it at the moment.
Right. So, once again, it's the Dark Ritual appeal. Choosing just the black mode of this, it costs black, exactly Dark Ritual. Target player draws 3, loses 3. So you could kind of like cruel bargain yourself, for less cards. And yeah, the Cruel Tutor, is that the name of that card? The Portal card that's like a Vamp Tutor that costs 3. That's not good. And if we have the mana to spree this twice, why aren't we resolving ad nauseum? I don't know. I think that this one is actually going to end up a victim of just, there are better things to do with the exact same mana. Though I will shout out modality here. Just Vampiric Tutor's banned. So if you could have a draw 3 for 3 or Vamp Tutor for 3, and we're not talking about 5 mana yet, maybe that's a spot where you want to convert one of those two things. Maybe it's better than some of its parts. I don't know. I think in a format as powerful as Legacy, we're not going to see this one.
All right. Do we have any thoughts to close up this episode here?
I love Legacy and I love Magic Online.
I concur.
Yeah, here to that. And remember, if you want to be a part of our mailbag episode, next episode, patrons and other various supporters, please let us know what your questions are.